Ladies and gentlemen, for what I think is going to be one of the best attended Caversham lectures we've had in quite some time. I'm Father Hugh Garran, the Vicar of St Peter's, Caversham here. For a parish like ours, embedded deeply in the Catholic tradition of Anglicanism, the subject of Anglican-Roman Catholic relations is of more than passing interest. And of course, since the historic visit of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Michael Ramsey, to Pope Paul VI in the 1960s, the Archic gatherings, meetings have been occurring regularly, and there has been a process of growing doctrinal convergence, but also difficulties and pitfalls along the way. Though it's a sign of just how far things have come that in 2012, Rowan Williams, shortly before stepping down as Archbishop of Canterbury, addressed the Catholic Synod of Bishops on the subject of contemplation and its relationship to evangelisation. So there has been remarkable growth indeed. And we're going to be hearing much more about that from our distinguished visitor this evening. David has been Bishop of Waikato for, I think, over a decade, Archbishop of New Zealand for a considerable period of time, and since 2013 has been our ambassador to the Holy See and also director of the Anglican Centre in Rome. He and I go way back to when we were undergraduates together at College House. And then when I was training at the College of the Resurrection Mirfield, he was preparing for ministry at St Peter's, Oxford. And we've met irregularly, but with a pretty constant stream of continuity through that time. It's been great to have him as a house guest for the last 4 days. We've caught up on a great deal of many subjects and people. So please put your hands together and welcome Sir Archbishop.
Thank you for coming this evening. I do appreciate it enormously. I'm recently back from Rome, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to share some of the instincts with my own people, with New Zealanders, in a context like this in beautiful Dunedin, which it has been over the last few days. I want to begin by paying a tribute really to Catholic Anglican relationships in Dunedin, as I've experienced them over the last 25 years, partly through my good friend Father Peter Norris, who's sitting here. He was the master of St Margaret's College in the University of Otago. And through friendships, through trust, through sharing resources, through needing each other really, over the years, Dunedin has been a place where Catholics and Anglicans have just got on with the chemistry of coming closer as people and letting that produce some results and some energy. Just friendship, an increase in trust. One of the great examples that happened of this was I was put in quite a difficult position by Radio New Zealand once with about an hour's notice. I was asked to comment on the relationship of the Queen to the Church of England and it affecting a royal marriage and some other canonical intricacies. And I wasn't totally familiar with all of the history, but I had about 45 minutes to get my story straight before I went on Radio New Zealand. And who are you going to call? I called the Catholics. I rang Father Peter, who is a church historian and studied the English Reformation in particular, and he enabled me to sound quite good. So I asked him, what do the Anglicans really think about this? He said, well, what you should say is, but there have been many other examples over the years, and Hamilton, the Catholic Bishop, Dennis Brown and I were able, just through friendship, the kind of thing that Father Peter Norris mentions, friendship is the key to ecumenism in the long run, and the key to doctrinal rapprochement in the long run, as you'll see. We're able to create a combined Christian social service village out of the old Catholic diocesan headquarters and retreat centre, Chanel Park as it was called. It became, after that, a Christian social service village of about 120 social workers serving about 8,000 people on a regular basis. But if you ask me why that happened or how that worked, I would just have to say friendship and trust. The doctrinal, or practical, or canonical, or fiscal challenges we faced were unlocked simply because we trusted each other and had reason to trust each other over a long period of time. So I begin with that tribute really to Catholic and Anglican chemistry in New Zealand, and certainly as I experienced in Dunedin. I was at Holy Name on Sunday night and asked to share the homily with the Catholic congregation there, and was profoundly moved by their hospitality, Eucharistically, and also in terms of the welcome. I was able to say that the last thing I said to the Pope before I left Rome, my wife and I had a private audience with Pope Francis, was to say, with some of my wife's relatives present, that we commended the cause of Mother Marie Joseph Aubert, who will be New Zealand's first canonical saint in due course. Her poster was there at the door of Holy Name, and it was Maria Pohepa, Mother Joseph, from Hiruharama, from Jerusalem, where that extraordinary community, James K. Baxter lived there later, you may know, and there's been a documentary about their life there, that remote Maori Catholic mission. So the first Maori to meet the Pope was an Anglican who told the Pope that they endorsed the canonisation process of New Zealand's first Catholic saint. We do pray, we do hope that will be the case. And so that kind of cross-pollination is very real with us here in this country. We have to get along. We're 1 degree of separation by and large in this country. And a frosty relationship, an unresolved conflict, can't stay that way for too long in this country. You meet them at the airport, or you come across your second cousin who happens to know, and away you go. You've got to get along. And that's why it's my view, as you'll see shortly, that although the Pope may never come to Aotearoa, New Zealand, I pray he does, I hope he does. We suggested he did the other day when I left. But whether he comes or not, it's my belief that he is very closely aligned to what Catholic New Zealand is on about, and Catholic New Zealand is very closely aligned to his own agenda. That's been my experience, and perhaps you'll see why as we go along. I was at the Anglican Centre in Rome, as you said, and our mission was to promote Christian unity in a divided world. I want to start with a difficult moment, because let's be real. I've talked about friendship and positive potential in this country, but actually, as you well know, we faced major tensions and disappointments with each other in the last 400 years, since the Reformation. This is one particular moment in 2009, and you can tell by the look on the face of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the look on the face of Archbishop, now Cardinal Nichols in London, that they were facing a spin ball. They were facing a spin ball because a group of Anglican clergy in England and some other parts of the world had been received into the Roman Catholic Church in what is called the Ordinariate. And it looked like a serious blow to ecumenism. It looked like a threat to the Anglican Catholic dialogue, if you will, because the Anglicans who were taken in as priests were married mostly, and they were allowed to practice an Anglican rite. But what I suppose hurt or concerned these two was that they weren't aware it was going to happen, particularly, and were kind of caught by surprise. And it raised questions of trust and communication at the time. It also raised questions of our attitude towards each other's ordination, our attitude towards each other's doctrine, and our attitude towards each other's ecumenical practice. On that particular day, what divided us appeared to be greater than what unites us. That's the feeling you would have had that day, and that's what they're feeling in this picture. But when you feel like this, when you're up against this kind of thing, a breach of what you might see as a breach of trust, or lack of communication, or misunderstanding, you, as a Christian, of course, are called to pray about it. There have been many occasions when Anglicans and Catholics have prayed together in the face of major tension and challenge. This is one more recent one, which I wouldn't have thought was possible in 2009, with that previous slide. I wouldn't have thought it was possible 18 months ago, but it happened quite recently. On the feast of Gregory the Great, in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. This is the altar of the chair, the Pope's own chair in St. Peter's Basilica, and this extraordinary, as you can see, Baroque structure behind. This is an Anglican choir from Merton College, Oxford, an Anglican bishop taking evensong in the Holy of Holies of the Catholic Church's most sacred space. And there are Anglican clergy, there are Catholic clergy, there are women vergers, there are women clergy, there are Jesuits, there are Benedictines, there are Knights of Malta, there are Anglican lay people. At this particular moment, notwithstanding our differences, challenges or difficulties, at one in spirit and in truth, at this moment, in this space, in this place. Never happened before. Never happened in this place since the Reformation. It was rather lovely because, as you may know, the Anglican office of evensong, which is what's being offered there, some of the clergy involved, is a combination of the traditional office from the Benedictines of Vespers and Compline, and Anglican evensong by Archbishop Cranmer was a synergy or synthesis of those two monastic offices. Anglican prayer book offices and liturgies come strongly from Benedictine office books in many ways. Morning and evening prayer, matins and evensong, that kind of thing. Well, this was the first time in the history of Christianity that the office of evensong came back to St. Peter's, if you will, having drawn from Catholic Vespers and Compline in 500 years. We were processing here to the tomb of Gregory the Great. It was just near this altar. We walked to his tomb where we sensed his coffin, his sarcophagus. He sent, as you know, St. Augustine to England in 595 with a group of Benedictine monks. 597 he became Archbishop of Canterbury, and it was his Benedictine community of mission evangelist monks who founded a Benedictine monastery, and that monastery later became a big church, which later became Canterbury Cathedral, which later became the mother church of the Anglican Communion, and that's why we were making this little journey of about 4 minutes to his tomb, praying together, walking together, singing together. We were singing from the same song sheet that afternoon. But it all started to defrost, really, as Hugh said, in 1966, notwithstanding the difficulties before or since. This is the extraordinary moment which Archbishop Michael Ramsey wasn't expecting. At a prayer service, again, drawing close to Christ in the belief that when you're closer to Christ, you're closer to each other, which is exactly what's happening here. Pope Paul VI, without the Archbishop of Canterbury knowing, takes off his own patriarchal ring, which he was wearing as Pope that day, but it came from his previous patriarchal see in Italy. Personal patriarchal ring worn by the Pope, placed onto Michael Ramsey's own right hand. Now that gesture, that sacramental action, contains 1,000 words. It says, first of all, that the Pope believes that the Archbishop of Canterbury is real, that he has orders which the Pope recognises, because the ring talks about episcopal orders. It means he sees this relationship as special, which is actually what he called it, a special relationship. It means that he thinks that we should do a lot more together than we have been. And so from this moment of prayer at St Paul's outside the walls, the Anglican Centre in Rome began, and so did the Anglican Roman Catholic Dialogue, and so did later on other commissions and ways of trying to find our way towards each other. So with this kind of depth of commitment, this kind of intimacy in prayer, the kind of difficulties in 2009 should not be seen as a shock horror, but an obstacle to be overcome, as a challenge to be met, as a reason to galvanise ourselves all the more. Now, one of the things I noticed in Rome, which surprised me at the time, because of this background, was that when the Church of England decided to ordain women to the episcopate, we were told that it would finish this off. It would be the death knell of what was started here. Notwithstanding the fact that women bishops had been a reality in the Anglican communion around the world for quite a long time. But exactly the opposite happened. What actually happened was the Catholics in our dialogue and in the Vatican said to us, we've got ourselves an obstacle here. Of course we do, we don't agree with you. But that means we should work all the more at this relationship. That's an invitation to try harder, to pray more often, to go deeper, to build more friendship. It's actually a spur to action and see what else we can do together if we don't agree on this. So the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission has a library in Rome, which is part of the Anglican Centre in Rome's library. Everything ever written about Catholics and Anglicans about each other is here, along with a whole lot of other books and documents. Let me give you a quick example of what we have agreed on so far, which is logged in this library. With the premise that what unites us is greater than what divides us. And this is what keeps us going through the kind of challenges of deep doctrinal work. First of all, to say the obvious, we agree, particularly since Vatican II, that each other's baptisms is valid if it's Trinitarian, which it is. If we're baptized in the name of the Triune God, we are ontologically one. We are theologically simpatico at that fundamental level of Christian initiation, Christian belonging, Christian community. And that means we are in communion in one way. As baptized members of Christ's body on earth, we agree on the meaning of baptism and the reality of baptism. Since Vatican II, the Catholic Church has said that we belong to the Church of God in that sense. And the Anglicans, of course, take the same view. That means that we aren't out of communion as baptized people. It means we're brothers and sisters. It means that we need to increase the degree of communion from baptismal oneness, which we already share, to unity we have already been given. We're not out of communion. We are in communion and seek to increase the degree of communion until it becomes Eucharistic, which it isn't at the moment. That's one thing. That's fundamental and it's huge if you think about it. Secondly, we have an agreement on the Eucharist. A lot of people don't realise this. It's been done a long time ago. We believe together in documents from the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission that the real presence of Christ is something we both acknowledge at the Eucharistic sacramental action. We had a debate a long time ago now, which had the Anglicans saying to the Catholics, well, you look like you think that the molecules change with the bread and wine. You look like you're saying this is a literal body and blood experience. And you're calling it transubstantiation, and you look as if, to us, like you think it's molecular almost. We can't do that, we said, the Anglicans said, we can't do that. The Catholics looked at us and said, you look like you are conducting a museum piece, retro look at a memorial. You're remembering something that happened a long time ago. And you're out of sentiment and retrospective we're thinking, wow, that was wonderful back there. And we can't go with that, Catholics said. So we decided to, which is perhaps not surprising, but it was surprising at the time, we said, well, what did Jesus say? And when you look at what Jesus said at the Last Supper, in the Greek forms we have it in, he said, do this, in the Last Supper, the Eucharist, do this for the recalling of me. Anamnesis is the Greek word. We looked at the Greek. And anamnesis, recalling, do this for the recalling of me, does not say, do this to look back and maybe remember me. And neither was he saying, and he wouldn't be using the same word, but he wasn't saying, this is visceral, a literal, molecular change. He wouldn't use that language. In Aramaic, you can't actually say, this is my body. There's no verb to be in the present in Aramaic. What he would have said was, this, my body. This, my blood. The is got us into a lot of trouble for a long time, but it doesn't exist in Aramaic. So we said, well, we've got to do better than this. Let's stop talking past each other and let's listen to Jesus, if you will, in particular. And when we looked at the word anamnesis, we found that it was rich and full of meaning. It means recalling, not just, oh gosh, I now remember. It means, in anamnesis in Greek, it means, call me and I will be there. I will be really present. Call me. And calling him, in the sense of his being present with us, is real presence in the action of bread and wine, being blessed, consecrated, shared. The whole action of the whole Eucharist, of the whole community, is an experience of real presence in a special and unique way. And so we said to each other, well, maybe we should stop stereotyping and maybe we should listen to Christ in the midst and in between us on lots of other things as well, which we have been getting to do. So, for example now, because we have this agreement on the Eucharist, of the doctrine of the real presence, if you are in Rarotonga and you're an Anglican, you can go to the Catholic cathedral there in Avarua every Sunday, because there's no Anglican priest present on Avarua, and the agreement with the Vatican is that if you can't get to your own Anglican Eucharist for some practical reason, and you can't in the Covenants, the Catholic Mass is available to you because we believe the same thing about the Mass. There was a series of examples how you interpret whether or not you can get to a Catholic Eucharist or an Anglican Eucharist. Depends on the distance involved and the transport and so on. The Pastoral Directory of Catholic Bishops has been very generous in that respect, if an Anglican priest isn't present. That's another example. We agree on the meaning of the Trinity, of course. We're incarnation, we're sacramental. We believe in the notions of apostolic succession. We believe in the ecumenical councils, the first four ecumenical councils, and the creeds that come from those. We believe in doctrine of sacramental marriage. We have agreements on that. We have agreements on the way we use the Bible. We have agreements on the way we approach the derivation of moral issues, philosophically and doctrinally and biblically. There's a huge amount we agree on. It's, in my view, if you take a bird's eye view, I think it's about 80% of core doctrine. And so, in Rome, in Little Anglican St. Augustine's Chapel, there we have Catholics, Anglicans, Lutherans, and Orthodox who come together regularly on Tuesdays just to be together and to pray together because of what we hold in common. We study together, we mix together, we share drinks together and so on. The Catholics persuaded the Methodists in Rome to honour John and Charles Wesley on a special feast day for them, which the Methodists didn't observe. But the Catholic clergy persuaded the Methodist missioner, who's one of our friends in this photo, to hold a John and Charles Wesley feast day, about 1,000 yards from the Vatican. And it was a bust of Charles Wesley. They put a small flower thing around his neck, which had never happened to Charles Wesley before. And then the Methodist missioner said to them, well, I'm going to invite the Vatican to come to this, and Methodists who are in Rome, and we'll serve soft drink. And the Monsignor from the ecumenical department said, don't be ridiculous. So he did extend it to gin tonic, that famous form of Anglican patronage. So we have these seminars from around the world, looking, studying, thinking, trying to meet in the middle with Christ in the midst. It makes all the difference if you go back to basics. But it helps enormously if the two leaders themselves are saying this and showing what this means. Now, in this particular moment, you can see the Archbishop of Canterbury placing into the hands of the Pope his own pectoral cross, which the Archbishop of Canterbury had made from the Cross of Nails Trust in Canterbury Cathedral. The Cross of Nails, you may recall, is a famous symbol. When the Luftwaffe bombed Coventry Cathedral, the dean the next day found two charred nails in the floor, kept them, put them up on the wall and said, Father, forgive. That symbol is the shape of the pectoral cross of the Archbishop of Canterbury, because he was Dean of Coventry, Sub-Dean, sorry, and he's placing into the hands of the Pope that replica of that cross. Father, forgive. The Pope, at this moment, and only three of us saw this happen because we were just standing beside these two, the rest of the congregation were a long way off and couldn't see this. The Pope took the cross and pressed the nail into his palm. In other words, this will cost us. This journey is carrying of a cross, which is pricey, but it is worth it. In the name of Christ crucified and risen. It's a very solemn, very powerful moment between these two. They meet together and talk together quite often. This is a lovely moment, as you can see, just talking about ways they can build greater and closer cooperation, a more doctrinal agreement. The Pope surprised us when he visited the Anglican parish in Rome. The first time he's ever visited an Anglican parish. He's visited cathedrals in England, but not an Anglican parish ever. First time the Pope's visited an Anglican parish church since the Reformation. And he said there, he said, in Argentina, when I was the Cardinal Archbishop there, we had remote tribal areas up in the hills where the indigenous communities still lived. And we just say, all the clergy we have can't get up there regularly or very often, so 1 month the Catholic priest goes up, a couple of months later the Anglican goes up, and he said, we all go to each other's Sunday services. He said, what's wrong with that? And then he said, and the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, that's the doctrinal monitoring group in Rome, are aware of this. He also said at this service, if we make an icon out of the troubles of the 15th and 16th century, we're looking in the wrong place. Make an icon out of Christ, crucified and risen. Make an icon out of Christ ascended. Look at that icon when we're together. Don't look back, look forward. And look at the, we would say, the eschatological hope that is in us. It's a much better way of looking forward. And so this led to an agreement to fight slavery together. This was a meeting in Rome, as you can see. The Pope's in the middle, the Archbishop of Canterbury is on the far left. We have a Jewish rabbi just to the right of the Pope. We have a Hindu guru to the left of the Pope. We have a Buddhist abbess to the right of the Pope. We have Shia and Sunni Muslims. We have an Orthodox. We have members of the Shinto and Buddhist Hindu communities right across the board, the major religions of the world, signing in Rome to act in solidarity against the slave trade today, which is now making more money than the oil industry. 33 million people are enslaved today, trafficked, but not enslaved. And the first thing that the Pope said to the Archbishop of Canterbury when they met over lunch was, the Archbishop of Canterbury said to the Pope, sorry, and they both agreed, we should fight this together. It's a crime against humanity. It's a scourge on the surface of the earth. And if we say, well, we can't cooperate because we don't fully agree, say, on doctrines of the Virgin Mary, the bodily assumption, the Immaculate Conception, for example, because we don't agree on the ordination of women, we can't fight injustice together, is ridiculous. If you think about the nature of poverty and oppression and the wounds of the world, we ought to be capable of responding in a healing, just synergy, a liberation, if you will, together. The gospel compels us, the kingdom of God calls us, this is where our energy should be. And maybe in fighting a cause like this together, we will find our conversation improves over Mary and over other doctrines, over the ordination of women. Well, who would have thought 2 years ago that a Catholic commission would be created by the Pope to look into the ordination of women to the diaconate? It's just about to finish its report. They came to see us in Rome before I left. Who would have thought that the Pope would think of saying out loud, maybe we should consider the ordination of married men in Brazil? Who would have thought that was possible? What unites us is greater than what divides us. This is an Assisi Feast Day here, where in the ancient city of Assisi, the home of St. Clare and St. Francis, again the world's religious leaders, hosted by the Pope, Archbishop of Canterbury on the left, Orthodox and others, pray for peace, pray for world peace. And it's a direct challenge to those who say that one of the main causes of discord and enmity and violence is, say, Muslim fundamentalism or Christian fundamentalism or Hindu fundamentalism. Of course it is, but that's fundamentalism. What actually comes out of the world's great faiths is a peace agenda. And on a day like that in Assisi, it's of enormous value to show and tell to the world that world's great religions want peace with justice. This is a lovely moment. I put it in here because the humour that they are able to share is rather lovely. The Pope is saying to the Archbishop of Canterbury, you realise I'm your older brother. And the Archbishop of Canterbury was thinking, of course you are, I'm 56, you're 7, you're nearly 80. And the Pope said, no, I'm your older brother by 2 days, because the Pope was inaugurated on a Tuesday, and the Archbishop of Canterbury was ordained on a Thursday of the same week. And by saying that they're brothers, which is the key to this moment, brothers in Christ, apostolic brotherhood. The Pope doesn't think the Archbishop of Canterbury has invalid orders in this photo. Actually, just before I left, we managed to clarify with Cardinal Compostela, the Comastri, of the Dicastery for Legislative Texts, that it's unhelpful to talk about Anglican orders as being utterly null and totally void. He's on record as saying this, you can Google on this if you want to. He said in a private paper, which was later released unexpectedly beyond our and his control, but it was released saying if you use canon law to say the Anglicans are null and void, and the Catholics have pure undiluted apostolic succession, it's the wrong tool to approach that dilemma with. What you should approach it with is theology. Start with theology and then work out the canonical implications. Leo XIII, who said Anglican orders are absolutely null and totally void, didn't have enough information in front of him at the time, which history has now reclaimed. And so this Cardinal of Legislative Texts said, it's an area we need to work on. Canon law is unhelpful in this regard. Let's talk theology. And he went on to say that he didn't think that Anglican orders were laden with total invalidity and nullity. Well, in this photo, that's clearly not the case. We're not thinking of each other as apostate or heretics or schismatics or the Antichrist or that kind of labelling that went on in the years following the Reformation and in the years, the generations since. These are the Anglican primates of the Anglican Communion with the Pope. Something I had to organise about a year ago, and he's receiving the latest Anglican Catholic dialogue material. Now, what we've got to there is quite interesting. We've got to the place where we have said we can work on doctrines of the Immaculate Conception and bodily Assumption. We can work on statements about papal infallibility. Let me give you a couple of examples of why the Pope is receiving this kind of material. This is in a book called Towards a Church Fully Reconciled, which contains these trajectories on these documents. First of all, on Mary. The question of the bodily assumption of Mary is something Anglicans have perceived as unhelpful in many cases, certainly officially, Lambeth conferences or other theological symposia, because bodily assumption suggests that her physical molecular assumption precedes the general resurrection, and only Christ, if you will, is resurrected in some metaphysical sense. So the Anglican concern has been, I can't see it in the Bible. Same with the Immaculate Conception of Mary from her mother, Anna. We can't see it in the Bible. Mary's mother is not mentioned as conceiving without sin of Mary. So we sat down and we've talked, and we've said, let's look closely at the two infallible statements of the papacy on these things. And fortunately, in both cases, the papal statement, infallible statements on these two things, talk about metaphysics. That's to say, what does Mary's origin really mean? What's she destined for? What's she called to? And where is Mary's future destiny? Where is Mary going to, if you will, in the salvation history that means so much to us? And if you can say that in the great providence of God, in the intentions of God, in the salvation history of God, Mary has a crucial place, and that her conception is of the will of God, and her destiny is of the will of God, you can say that these are ontologically significant, these are huge, these are special, these are cause for great veneration, great reverence, but not worship. And if you make that distinction, the Anglicans can begin to think, okay, I thought you were asking me to worship her, which I can't do. And the Vatican turned around and says, and you see it in this document, no, we've never actually said we worshipped her. We have always venerated and revered her, her origin and her destiny. And what these documents, these statements are about, are hallowing, venerating, treasuring that origin and that destiny. And the technical word is their metaphysical, ontological statements. They aren't molecular statements. They aren't visceral statements. And so we've said to each other, let's talk more. Let's pray more. Let's see if there's common ground we can work on. And so the statement on Mary, which you may have seen, Mary, grace and hope in Christ, grace meaning her origin, hope meaning her destiny. Mary, grace and hope in Christ is on the internet. You can go there and have a look at what we have said so far. And her Magnificat, for example, is of enormous value if you see her as special in this sense, because it's kind of liberation theology. The mighty come down from their thrones, the humble and the meek are exalted, and you've got a prophet in the tradition of Miriam and Anna coming through as the mother of Jesus Christ and raising him this way in the prophetic traditions of the Old Testament, particularly Miriam and Hannah. There's a lot of ground there we share in common, and a lot more work to do. The other one is on authority, which he has in his hands there too. The question is, can Anglicans regard the Pope as infallible? And the work we did on that, in a document called The Gift of Authority, again you can Google on this, was like this. We said, of course we can't say as Anglicans that the Pope is infallible. And the Catholics on our team said, well, neither do we. They said what we say is that when the conciliar process of the Church is received across the world in a kind of census fidelium, if the Pope senses that a doctrine of core importance has the support of the laos, significant representatives throughout the world, he then has confidence to proclaim it or to announce it. Having said that, he's only done that a couple of times on matters of core doctrine. The other doctrines are not regarded as infallible statements. And so we said, well, we will not abandon synods. We will not abandon worldwide consensus attempts. We will not abandon the voice of the laity. We will not regard an utterance from the Pope as infallible unless we have pre-agreed by conciliarity that this is core doctrine for us. So he announces it, but he does not make it or confect it or force it. It arises out of the sensus fidelium, out of conciliarity and synodality. And so we agreed on that. Now the first test of this happened quite quickly. Within a short period, at this particular moment, we had the Synod on the Fact in Rome of the Catholic Church. Catholics practicing at synods extremely carefully, with 7 months of preparation and a great deal of research and a worldwide dragnet through the Catholic world of their opinion about sexual ethics, about contraception, about divorce, about annulment, about those intimate, personal matters that affect us all. And in that synod, the Pope presided in love. No infallible statements were made. It was Acts 15. It was an apostle presiding over representatives from all over the world, having sent out a questionnaire all over the world the year before on all these subjects, having compiled all the results, I went to the place where they sorted them to a vast mailing room where they were analysing all these results, and then talking about them without confidentiality. So you had the debates from the Synod on the Family being reported each day in the press. We had an Anglican representative there, the Bishop of Truro, who was asked to speak and give the Anglican view. And some of his remarks ended up in the Pope's final summation document. One of the things he said, which ended up in the Pope's own remarks, this is an example I'm suggesting of conciliarity, was the Church must be aware that family shapes change over a lifetime. And the Church must be big enough and loving enough to embrace those changes, those adaptations. You can't dump a template down onto a family and say they should all be like this. Pope put that in his own summing up remarks. So he listened to all this, the two big gatherings, and then he published a modest gives you the main summation of the Synod on the Family. It's a pastoral document, it's careful, it's balanced, it's kind of a bell curve survey of Catholic experience. It's not infallible, it's consultative, it's Acts 15. It represents what the high common ground appeared to be. It's actually inching forward on pastoral matters around access to the Mass and divorce. It leaves local discretion on some of these things. It also, just a couple of weeks before it was convened, they had delegated the annulment tribunals to local regions and not Rome. So with that kind of presidency of love, with that kind of focus for unity, primus inter pares papacy, we can see ways in which Anglican synodality might one day meet papal focus for unity. One day, maybe. Now, at the Anglican end, of course, and this was made plain at this meeting, we are practicing what universal, shall we say, unity university might be like, with real difficulty and some major trauma and some partial distancing in some parts of the Anglican communion. What we are practicing. And the last primates meeting was better than the previous one, over Anglican divisions. Not perfect, but better. More people in the room, better conversation. We're practicing what universal community might look like as a form of variety, but held together by bonds of affection. And if that process meets this sort of Catholic synodality, we will have much more in common at political level. And the question of infallibility and authority will slowly, very slowly, work towards each other. And so we have Catholic, a Pope meeting an Anglican bishop from Ghana, from India, from the United States. It's Bishop Catherine Wainick, was the Bishop of Indianapolis. I put this in because it was a very scary moment. This is me saying these things in front of the papal household. And on my left, there's a combined choir of Anglicans and the boys of the Sistine Chapel choir singing the same thing for an hour. And the papal household down here on the... And the will to work with what I've been saying to you is real, and you could feel it that evening in the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo's great Last Judgment behind there, and the extraordinary painting in the middle of the ceiling, you know, the two fingers, God the Father and Adam, or God and Adam. And the kind of space that's given now to say these things and to listen to these things is at the heart of our two communions. It's the Pope, it's an Anglican service at a combined Vespers. Tom Wright, in one of the ancient sites associated with St. Paul, hard to get access to, but he was given it. Study groups coming from all over the Anglican Communion to try to absorb this high common ground. Other examples as well. Now, this is an example of where Catholic universality and Anglican synodality or conciliarity met. What you see in this picture is the crozier head of Pope Gregory the Great. It is thought. It's the late 6th century, we think, crozier head of a lamb being attacked by a dragon inside the head of a crozier, kept at the church of San Gregorio Arciello in a cupboard. We found out where the cupboard was, and the prior decided to release it. It had never been released before. Catholics helped us do this. On the left, the Gospel and Office books of St. Augustine, a missionary Benedictine evangelist to England, who went there, as you know, in 595 and became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. So you've got papal authority and missiology and the first Archbishop of Canterbury. The two symbols, if you will, of primacy between our communions. And these were put on the table of the second to last primates meeting in Canterbury, when they were thinking of splitting up. When it was rumoured by the press that the Anglican communion was about to break. Several of the Anglican archbishops, taxis with their motors running outside the meeting hall, believing it would be the end. But they prayed with these two symbols in the middle of the room. And the implicit message here is, do you want to saw off the branch on which you're sitting? Really? Can you find this somewhere else? This heritage, these roots? Do you want to abandon all these years of conversation and trust and hope and failure and learning? Do you really want to do that? And at that meeting they decided not to. Here's the Crozier head leaving the monastery of San Gregorio Arcelio, which is the monastery Augustine was prior of, before he went to Canterbury. Catholic and Anglican priests putting it in a box. It was given a first-class seat by the airline, I don't know why. It was given a glass of champagne and some noodles. I don't know why. It arrived at Canterbury Cathedral in time for the primates meeting, and the Archbishop of Canterbury received it, shaking with emotion. First time the Crozier head of Pope Gregory the Great had got to England, first time it had been beside the Gospels of St. Augustine. And there they were. The Bishop of Rome's focused the unity, primacy, with the primate of all England's. And in return, the Pope decided to give the Archbishop of Canterbury a replica of the Crozier head of Pope Gregory the Great. The lamb being attacked by the dragon in a box for him to carry. In other words, this is not a memorial ritual, this is not a piece of feel-good. Let's remember that was lovely, let's exchange relics. This will guide us into the future. Let's keep in touch. Let's share this episcopacy the way Augustine and Gregory did. It's of enormous significance. So he held it up, he couldn't believe it. And then the Pope gave him the hole that goes beneath it, meaning you can carry this, use it, it's yours from me. There's the original beside the replica. Then we had the next day a commitment, this is in a Jesuit oratory near where I live, commitment to work together for justice and peace around the world from here on in, thoroughly and practically, accountably. So the Pope and the Archbishop said to about 50 Catholic and Anglican bishops who paired together around the world, go out from here and model collaboration on justice and peace wherever you can, against slavery, against trafficking, work for the refugee services, try and intervene in civil wars. And so one of the consequences of this agreement, this approach, written down, a big common statement, was in South Sudan. David Shearer, the former Labour Party leader in New Zealand, is now the UN missioner, peace missioner to Juba and South Sudan. We worked with David in the Vatican, and he went to Lambeth Palace, carrying out this mandate. And he said, what I'd like to see happen is the Pope and the Archbishop of Canterbury coming to South Sudan next year and announcing a ceasefire. We need 6 months to work towards this, and we'll use the churches, the two big churches in South Sudan are Catholic and Anglican, to provide a peace plan. They're the only groups left who are trusted across the board. And this is one of the direct fruits of this kind of consensus. That's a refugee station on the island of Lampedusa, where the Pope celebrated Mass on an upturned boat with 3,000 people on the beach. The boat was a symbol of all those refugees who drowned at sea. They upturned the boat, he celebrated Mass on the boat as the altar, and then he said to the Muslim community, and there were quite a few at the Mass, "You are much closer to the kingdom of God than you think at the moment." We took a Lampedusa cross made of wood from boats that had sunk, in which every person had drowned, and took it back to use it as a symbol for these pairs of Catholic and Anglican bishops to go around the world and use it on their altars as a sign. The Pope had a crozier made out of this wood. The Archbishop of Canterbury has one, and then we agreed to common action in Mediterranean hope projects for refugees, but also around the world as well. And so, the anti-slavery network, studying together, praying together, singing together, blessing together. This is something that you can see the look on my face. I couldn't believe this is the note I'll end on. I'll have some questions. This is at St Paul's outside the walls where Michael Ramsey had been given the ring in 1966. 5,000 people. I think in the presence of St Paul, I believe he's buried there. The Pope called me up along with an Orthodox Archbishop. We were both quite surprised at the end of the Vespers. And he said, he held out this copy of the book, which was in Italian, and he said, read this. And I looked at it, and it said, Pontifical Blessing. So he said, read the first sentence. He spoke to me in Italian. Fortunately, my Italian's not very good, but I was able to say the words, held my hand up. He said the same thing to the Orthodox Archbishop, who did the same thing, and then we all three of us made the sign of the cross as the Pope pronounced the actual words of blessing himself, which was the penultimate and ultimate line. Now that's an extraordinary gesture, a sign that we ought to bless each other and be blessed by each other and be a blessing to others together. And so, women clergy, lay people, women and men, people from all over the world, together, keeping our eyes open and praying for a new day and a new world. What unites us is greater by far than what divides us. No one of us has got it all together, but together each one of us can share it all. That's enough for me. Perhaps we can have some questions now. Anybody like to start off with a comment or a question or a puzzlement or throw me a spin ball? That's all right. Yes.
Can we talk about the gift of authority, the second to last Archic document that came out in 2005? Now, the punchline of that was whether the two churches could accept the universal primacy of the Bishop of Rome in a church that took conciliarity seriously, synodality seriously, and also gave a voice to the laity. And the end of that document throws out two challenges to both churches, to the Roman Catholic Church to take the principle of synodality, that bishops meeting together would give a genuine devolved authority in the church, and that the voice of the laity would be taken seriously in the decision-making councils of the church. To us, the Anglican Church, it threw up the challenge of taking conciliarity seriously. Now, the problem here is that our instruments of communion, the Anglican Consultative Council, the Primates Meeting and the Lambeth Conference aren't conciliar bodies. They are consultative bodies. They meet to advise one another, to promote the bonds of affection, and the one thing that those bodies have resolutely refused to do is to accept that authoritative role. And we tend to tolerate anomalies as a way of dealing with conflict, which the Roman Catholic Church finds very difficult because we are tolerating more and more anomalies. And this is why sometimes these gatherings have threatened to break up. Won't we, in the end, have to accept the challenge of turning one or two of these bodies into genuinely conciliar bodies and agreeing to make difficult and hard decisions about what we do and don't believe and who is in and who is out?
Yes, we will. And I think there are three ways we can progress there. The first is the Anglican Consultative Council, which, as you rightly say, is advisory, and there is no international canon law. But there are moves now to put through the Anglican Consultative Council the first three sections of the old draft covenant, not the fourth section, which had a kind of a, I think many of us felt had a draconian aspect to it, but the first three sections were common declarations on the faith we already share and the ecclesiology we already share. There will be an attempt, I think, at the next Anglican Consultative Council to put that through as a common faith statement for the Anglican Communion, and then the Anglican Consultative Council's decision in three houses from all over the world, with every province present, will be regarded as holding that together for us with considerable reality. What we don't have at the moment is international canon law, as I said, but there's a group working on that very question at the moment. What would give us enough legitimate freedom, the Romans would call that subsidiarity, local freedom, but enough gravitas to our unity globally? How would you work that out? And there's a group, a canon law group working with Norman Doe at the moment, who has actually got other denominations on it as well. We hosted them in Rome on that very question. It'll take a long time. It'll be very difficult. But bear in mind too that when my friends, certainly ecumenically from the Catholic Church, who look at us doing this, tend to say, you should try to work on this. You should develop more coherence this way. That will help us enormously, as you suggested. But they then say, we actually experience quite a lot of diversity ourselves. It's encased in a totally different box. It's under international canon law, it's under the Western Rite, etc. But be assured that variety is our experience as well. And that the Pope and the dicasteries of the Roman Curia spend a lot of time trying to negotiate what diversity and variety looks like. And you have the classic example, which most people in the West aren't aware of, is that the Western Rite of the Catholic Church holds up celibacy as a great virtue, which it can often be for priests. But in the Eastern Rite, the Oriental Rite of the Catholic Church, most of the clergy marry. And in fact, I went to the Oriental Rite Seminary in Rome quite often, and the ordinands there, Catholic Oriental Rite ordinands, told me that it was normal to marry if you wanted a good parish. And they actually arranged for the ordinands to meet people. So that's quite a considerable degree of diversity within Catholic universal canon law. It's a totally different set of canon law. And in fact, you look at the Oriental Rite Catholic liturgies, they look very similar to Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox liturgies. The vestments, the protocols, the Eucharistic prayers are very, very different indeed. So what we would be interested in, I think, is acknowledging the reality of that diversity in Catholicism and saying, how can Anglicans retain a reasonable measure of our diversity and freedom, subsidiarity, like that. Now, we're not there yet, and we wouldn't give up our freedoms, our local freedoms, but we would be interested in what a canopy, like Eastern Rite, Western Rite, say Anglican Rite, would look like. I think you did hint at one of the ways forward too, is that because of what you've seen on the screen, and because of Archbishop Justin's own agenda, it's bonds of affection that are more likely to make this a reality. It's bonds of affection that are more likely to... He's visiting every primate. He did that very quickly when he began. They now trust each other more. And although there are anomalies, there are also anomalies in Catholicism, but they're of a different sort. So we kind of recognise each other's anomalies and maybe forgive each other, have compassion on each other, and find each other in that sort of reality.
Yes, me being a Catholic background, I was quite impressed tonight how well you addressed all the sacraments, and from the Anglican perspective after the conference with the Catholic Church in Rome. I was just going to ask about the Anglican Church position on the sacrament of reconciliation. The Catholic priests say absolve sins, they believe in what Peter says, those whose sins you forgive, they are forgiven, those whose sins you retain, they are retained. Now, with the Anglican Church, who has the authority in God's name to absolve sin?
We have the same theology of the sacrament, or sacramental action of reconciliation. It's the same.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you went to an Anglican priest and asked to make your confession, there's a rite, there's a liturgy that she is called to follow, and you have every right to ask for that, and every right to believe its reality. And I heard confessions myself as an Anglican priest and bishop.
And then the priest will give you what they believe is the appropriate penance, like they do that with the Lord's Prayer, or in Catholics they talk about a decade of the Rosary, those who are familiar with the Rosary of the Catholic Church. What would the Anglican Father, what would the Anglican clergy give if there's any such thing as a penance, if they believe it's the right course of action after you've been absolved of your sin, to validate that thing?
It would be, in principle, it would be the same. It would be a spiritual discipline or a piece of pastoral advice about, it might be restorative justice.
Yes.
For example, it's quite common if you sin in a way that you can't, say you sin and you go to confession and you receive absolution from the priest will often suggest you do something about the consequences of your sin, which is restorative.
Yes.
And if you can't do something restorative, then they might suggest you do something else that is healthy for you, and do not try to resist the temptation to sin again, kind of thing. And that's, it's not as frequent in the Anglican Communion. Catholicism has encouraged it much more frequently, much more regularly, and there are more rules about it. But it's the same theology in the Anglican. The New Zealand Prayer Book is a rite of reconciliation.
Very nice.
Which was approved, by the way, by the Catholics. We put all our draft liturgies of the New Zealand Prayer Book before a Catholic liturgist called Father Charles, name's gone out of my head. Cooper, thank you. And he approved them from a Catholic point of view.
Well, as I said, I'm raised Catholic, but now you're talking a member of the Salvation Army. Sitting right here. We're all one in Christ.
So then we've got these two things in common, apart from the most important one is a shared faith. But we're both fellows of St. Margaret's College. Now, that college is a bastion of ecumenism. And one of the things I want to just tell you all about is that, and I'm going to be corrected if I'm not correct, when Father Dr. Peter Norris was the warden master of St. Margaret's College, he developed a strong friendship with Philip Richardson, who was the warden of Selwyn College. That friendship developed to such a close extent that when Philip was made bishop, who preached the sermon at that occasion, and it was Dr. Peter Norris. And was that the first and only time that a Catholic priest had preached at the ordination of an Anglican bishop? Maybe.
Quite possibly. But that was remembered and hallowed as a memory, still is, as a remarkable sign, an outward and visible sign of these inward and spiritual truths. What you want is good signs, good gestures, and that makes all the difference in the world. And canon law has to catch up with that in due course. If you try to run your life exclusively by canon law, although canon law is important to take seriously, but it can't be the prophetic vision. It's a conserving function. What you want in prophetic vision is bold acts of friendship, dramatic, unexpected demonstrations of love, and that moves us on. That moves us forward. The Pope is quite good at this kind of thing. He, you may have read the story about that. He only has 3 sets of clothes. He's a Jesuit, and as a religious, they don't have many clothes. And he has 1 pair of shoes, they're orthopedic, got a bad back, and he chose to live in a small flat in a hostel at the back of St. Peter's, and not in the Apostolic Palace. And he's known for the common touch, he's known for his natural ecumenism, his interfaith sensitivities, his humanity, his compassion, and he came across the Swiss Guard standing outside his room. And the rooms are all the same, he's just got a little bed and a couch and a TV and a microwave, that's it. And the Swiss Guard was outside the room. So he said to the Swiss Guard, "Why don't you sit down and I'll make us a sandwich?" And this is what he's like ecumenically as well. And the Swiss Guard had a pike, a helmet, pantaloons, and was from Switzerland, very precise. And he said, "Your Holiness, I can't sit down and have a sandwich because I have my orders to stand here on duty." And the Pope said, "Oh, just for a minute, let's sit down." And the Swiss Guard said, "No, Your Holiness, I have my orders." And the Pope said quite innocently, "Who gave you those orders?" And the Swiss Guard, looking straight ahead, said, "Well, that's the captain of the Swiss Guard, Your Holiness. This is day 3 of the Pope's pontificate." And then the Pope said, "Oh, okay," and this is quite a genuine question, "who gives the captain of the Swiss Guard his orders?" And the Swiss Guard stood there and said, paused for a moment, turned puce, and then said, "Well, that would be you." So the Pope said, "Sit down and have a sandwich." But that kind of attitude we've seen in other things he's done. He washed the feet of a Muslim woman prisoner who had AIDS during Holy Week, when the current rules prefer him to do it only to the clergy. And he, one of the lovely things about him being a Jesuit and Ignatian is when he's attacked with a challenge over doctrine or over criticism, he says, and he said this in public, "When somebody criticizes me or challenges me or is appalled with me or asks the question, 'Is the Pope a Catholic?' I try to say to myself, is this coming from a dark place in the other person, a place of fear or anger, or is it coming from a place of light and truth? And if it's coming from a place of light and truth, I need to take it extremely seriously, maybe things I need to do to change. But if it's coming from a place of fear or shadow, the light of Christ must dispel those things." It's a very interesting reply. So he doesn't get paranoid, he doesn't get aggressive. He just takes it down into prayer, the Ignatian discernment process. And you can see him doing that. It's quite remarkable.
Where are you getting from here?
Sorry?
Where are you heading now? You're now not in Rome
No,
anymore.
I'm back in Hamilton. People say to me, you must miss Rome compared to Hamilton. And I don't. I loved Rome. I loved being there. It was very exotic, remarkable, culturally overwhelming. I got to know the Pope at different occasions, and that will remain with me to the end of my days. But I prefer Hamilton because family, hearth, home. And when you look at the Waikato River, it's a living stream, the artery of the people, they call it. When I'm looking at a big medieval basilica in Rome, it's not quite the same thing. So I'm Kiwi, and this is where I belong. And, God made some wonderful cathedrals here, including the mountains and the forests. Anything else?
Perhaps that's a good note to end on.
Your emphasis tonight has been on the Anglican Catholic relationships. How much did you have to do with the Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox, rather than the Catholics?
Yes,
building of fraternity and so on.
yes. There were good relationships with them, and I saw them quite a lot. They don't have an embassy in Rome, and they of course have different patriarchates, but we saw the ecumenical patriarch a number of times. He was in that photo in Assisi, and he's wonderful, Bartholomew. He joined us on the anti-slavery network, and that's been very good. As you know, he attempted a pan-Orthodox synod not so long ago, and got a majority percentage attendance. He works closely with the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he's very close to the Pope. So.
When that's translated into our situation here in New Zealand, often the Orthodox, like the Antiochian one down the road, in the street and everything, to a certain extent they're excluded, they're not invited into some of the ecumenical things that we have here.
You say they're not invited?
Quite often they're not invited.
Okay. Well, certainly, as you can see from that blessing photo, if you get Protestants, Anglicans, Catholics, Orthodox together in a Vespers service, you have Christendom together, the original family, and that's quite something.
Perhaps I can provide part of the answer. John Paul II talked about the Church breathing with its right and left lungs, and he was referring to Eastern Orthodoxy as well as to the Western Catholic Church. And I think that the unification of two churches was a high priority for him. One of the heartbreaks of his patriarchal ministry was the fact that the end of the Russian dominance in Eastern Europe released certain tensions that made that more difficult. Yeah. David, this has been a presentation that's been engaging, interesting and absorbing, and also very instructive for both our respective churches, and has opened up a wonderful insight into the ministry of the Anglican Church in Rome and to the growing bonds of affection that the present Holy Father has with many key leaders in the Anglican Church. Thank you so much for this very rewarding session you've had with us. And